Back. Russ, thank you for always running this thing. It would not happen without you. So I really appreciate you doing it. So gang, hey, I've got an exciting conversation with you this morning. You know, it's been, gosh, I guess 12 years now. 12 years this month, in fact, where George and I and Rob in Utah, of course, started Everest. And the growth that I've been through, the person I am today as compared to who I was then, not even recognizable. And I really mean that, gang. There have been so many things that have led to that change. But one of the most important things is the thing that I want to chat with you about this morning. And it's specifically about a journal, keeping a journal. Why keep a journal and how to use it. You know, and I'm going to share with you a story here, but also I want to share with you a quote. George and I spent some time this weekend with our boys. We like to go to Moab, and I had really an epiphany or a defining moment over a decade ago in Moab, where I was listening to a message by my favorite mentor, whom I've never met, and his name is Jim Rohn. And one of the things that Jim talks about, of course, those of you who know him, about personal development, about personal growth. And he talks about one of the most important tools in the process of personal growth. And he talks about a journal. And he asks the question, why keep a journal? And he gives some really good answers. And I want to just read to you this quote, and then we're going to use that as the basis for us to have this conversation this morning. So it's too long for me to have memorized it on short order, but let me just read this to you. If you're serious about becoming a wealthy, powerful, sophisticated, healthy, influential, cultured, and unique individual, keep a journal. Now, isn't that interesting? He talks about all of those things, being wealthy, powerful, sophisticated, healthy, influential, cultural, and unique. Keep a journal. Think about that. Doing one activity, according to him, in his estimation, can lead to that sort of existence, that sort of life. And I have to share with you, in my opinion, it works. It does, in fact, do that thing. So my question for you is, do you keep a journal? What is interesting is that every morning with Morning Ascent, we take the time for about 7 minutes or so to write in what we call our journal. I remember when I first started years ago, I used a yellow pad or a spiral bound notebook. And what I realized is that I would write those things, whatever I was writing down for Morning Ascent, for example, or some event. And then I would set the notepad down or the spiral notepad and lose it, forget about it. And what a waste, what a shame. And we're going to talk about why that's the case. But I have since changed it from that to something that looks like, let me grab this and I will show you. It looks like this. Most people see this. I'll turn it an angle where you can see it. Most people see that and think that it's a Bible. And there's a reason that I buy journals like that, because I believe that, as Jim said to me in many conversations, that if you're serious about those things, you'll buy a book that represents how serious you are in your commitment to those things and becoming that person. So gang, one of the things I would ask you is, did you take the time to write down for those 7 minutes your goals, your gratitudes, and set your intention? And if you did, how worthwhile are those things? Are you really serious about those things? Do they have value? And if they are, did you put them in a spiral bound notepad that you can buy at Walmart? Did you put them on a yellow legal pad? Did you type them into your phone? Or did you, in fact, put them in something that looks like it really has value, that it means something? So let me share this story with you. I've shared this story before, but it's an interesting story. And some of you probably have not heard it, but it's also important as part of this conversation. About 7 years ago, I was in Palm Beach, Florida, had the opportunity to tour a $75 million estate. Beautiful estate that was situated right on the ocean. Literally the backyard of this property was the ocean. There was nothing between the home and the beach. It was just the home, the backyard, the beach, the ocean. This home was, I don't know, it was probably 15,000 square feet. It had every possible amenity that you could think of in an estate that's $75 million. But the thing that was most notable about this beautiful home as you walked in on the right-hand side was a library. And I walked up and was just in awe looking at this library that had if you're familiar with, like the old libraries, like the New York City Library that has the multiple shelves that go up, 18, 22 feet. And then they've got those big ladders that you can climb up on, and they roll around on the rails and the rollers. It had one of those. It was that nice of a library, thousands of books. And I'm standing there in awe looking at this and just imagining all of the wealth of information and the apparent commitment that the owner of this home has to knowledge and information. And what was fascinating is I stood there and I'm looking at this, and this is the conversation I'm having with myself. I turned and looked at the woman who was standing next to me. I said, "Isn't that amazing? Look at all those books." And she looked at me and she said, "Yeah, but I'll bet he hasn't even read any of those books." And I looked at her as if she'd lost her mind. And I couldn't help myself. And I said, "My suspicion is that if he owns a $75 million home like this and 8 or 9 others around the world, which he does," I said, "he's probably read most, if not all, of these books." What we know is that those who are highly successful are highly learned. Well, gang, I believe that it's important that, we read other books written by other people, but I believe it's also important that we, really write our own book. And I think that our journal becomes our own book. Really, we get to chronicle our own life. We get to acknowledge, our life in this book, this journal. So the question that I want to ask, I guess rhetorically, is why keep a journal? Why keep one practically? I mean, Jim talked about all those things, but why practically keep a journal? There were 2 things that I thought of as I asked myself that question. The first one is this, and write this down, because I hope that you're taking notes for this particular purpose, because of this fact that I'm going to give you, okay? Why would you keep a journal, practically speaking? Because of your memory. Your memory is not that good. My memory is not that good. Mine's probably worse than yours. But the fact is that the average human memory is not that good. Here's a fact. Research shows that if you were to attend an event, for example, this one, an hour from now, 50% of what I will say, you will forget. It's going to be forgotten. And the only way to retain it long-term is to write it down. Here's an even more interesting statistic, that within 24 hours, 70% of the information that I will relay to you, you will have forgotten. So within 24 hours, 70% of what I've said basically becomes irrelevant because you don't even remember it. And then within 1 week, 90% of what someone says to you in an event like this, you will have forgotten, only retaining at best 10%. So why keep a journal? For that reason. You hear me talk all the time about it's important that you read, that you watch, that you listen to, that you associate with, and you participate in events that will help you grow, to take in this information, right? These new ideas and concepts, these beliefs, these philosophies, these standards, right? And make them yours. Well, it's difficult to do that if within an hour you've forgotten 50% of it. In a day, you've lost 70% of it. And in a week, you've lost 90% of it. So gang, the reason you would keep a journal, if you're reading, watching, listening, associating, and participating, is because otherwise you're not going to retain it. And they say this, the mother of memory is repetition. Man, you can't attend an event like this or read a book or listen to some important message and expect that you're going to hold on to that information. You just simply won't. It's not going to happen. And so it's important that you write it down. And the great thing about the journal is you get the opportunity to revisit those things that you learned, that you wrote down. So that would be the first reason as to why you should keep a journal. The second reason is this, and I hope you write this down as well, is it promotes a healthy conversation with yourself. See, gang, I believe that the single most important conversation that you will ever have is the conversation that you maintain with yourself up here. And so I believe that it's important that you consciously recognize that conversation, this conversation with yourself, and you do it so that you can create clarity. Putting it in the journal creates clarity. You have an opportunity to write down your wants, your needs, your wishes, your desires, your hopes, your fears, the things that you're dealing with, your aspirations, the life that you want to create. See, writing a journal creates clarity of those things, clarity of purpose, clarity of challenge, clarity of solution. It's such an important part. It's the reason that Jim said, going back to it, if you want to be wealthy, powerful, sophisticated, healthy, influential, cultured, and a unique individual, keep a journal. See, it's not possible without that. The journal creates clarity. And here's the thing, clarity creates power. The more clear you are about all of those things, the more powerful you can act. You can act with greater intention. And isn't that what we want? We want to act with intention, because when we act with intention, we act with more power. When we act with more power, we get better results. It's about being more confident. A journal can help you be more confident because it helps you discover who you are and what you want. And then the other thing I would say about, the fact that it promotes this healthy conversation is that it's cathartic. Have you ever written something down and it just felt good to write it down? It's like, I wrote that down. I got that out. I said that thing. See, it provides a psychological relief. It also identifies these patterns that we have, these loops, these loops that we put in our brain, thinking things over and over and over. And the problem is, for most people, those thoughts tend to be negative. So it's good to put them on paper so that we can actually see what's going on in our brain. So practically speaking, those two reasons, I believe, are great reasons as to why you should keep a journal, in addition to what Jim said. So the question then is, it's obvious now we should keep a journal. I think everybody agrees with that. You agree with that. How do you use the journal? How practically do you leverage it and get the most out of it? Well, I want you to write this down. Number one, you have to ask questions. If you have a journal, the best way to use it is not just to write things down that you've learned from others by reading, watching, listening, associating, and participating, but writing down questions. Questions that you would ask yourself. Because gang, look at this. The best conversations are nothing more than a series of questions. The best conversations. You want to have a great conversation with anybody, including yourself? Ask a question. The second reason is this, that the thinking process starts by asking questions. See, most people don't do enough thinking. They don't. They do a lot of habitual acting. They go through their day doing the same thing over and over again, but not you, because you take the time, set aside the time to ask yourself questions, to engage in the thinking process. So how do you use a journal? Well, you ask questions. You have to ask a series of questions. So what questions would you ask? I put together a list of 10 questions that I would suggest that you could be asking yourself. Maybe you don't ask every one of these every single day, but these are questions that you ponder and that you actually will write out in your journal. In other words, you promote a healthy conversation with yourself. Because see, most people don't have a healthy conversation with themselves. Most people have a very negative conversation with themselves, and it happens subconsciously. So what I'm talking about is taking that subconscious conversation, making it conscious, and improving the conversation. And gang, do not underestimate the significance of that process. The single most important thing that you can do to ensure your own personal growth and your success in achieving whatever it is that you want is to make certain that we improve the way in which we think. Because the way we think affects the way that we feel, and the way that we feel affects the way that we act. And the way that we act creates our reality. So it all starts with changing the way that we think. So if you want to think better, you want to think more powerfully with greater intention, with greater clarity, then ask yourself what? Some great questions. So would you like to know those questions? Somebody give me a yes in the chat box. I need to know that you're there. Hopefully everybody will. Would you like to know the questions? Yes. Okay, Mary. Thank you, Crystal. Aaron. Okay, let's do it. Here we go. All right. The first question that I believe, and this isn't in any particular order, but this is a great question. The question is, who am I? Ask yourself that question. Who am I? Who am I? When I first asked myself that question consciously, I said, well, I'm the son of Jack and Mary Ciet. I grew up in Orangeville, Utah, and I started to tell my story. Here's what is interesting, gang, and the reason that this question is so important. I'm going to say something to you, and I'm going to confront you when I say this, and I mean it sincerely. You're a liar. Every one of you is a liar. You lie to yourselves. Now, hold on before you start to get a little angry or say, who the hell does he think he is calling me a liar? Let me clarify. You're a liar, every single one of you. What you do and what we all do, what I do, is we tend to say things to ourselves that aren't true, that are very counterproductive and negative. We say negative things about ourselves that aren't true. So one of the great things about asking that question, who am I? It allows us to get real about the good things about who we are, who we truly are genuinely. The kind, loving, caring person that we are, the smart person that we are. Not that we don't have challenges, right? I mean, we want to hear the good, we want to hear the bad, we want to hear the ugly. But man, it starts with acknowledging who we are. And the fact is that who you are is amazing. And it's important that you consciously have that conversation. And no better place to do that than in a journal by answering that question. Who am I? So the thing that I would challenge you to do is, yes, of course we have to acknowledge the bad and the ugly, but I really want you to focus on the good, because most people don't. They habitually focus on the bad and the ugly. And that is why they live an average life. That is why life is so challenging, because they bring to life every single day a person who is a fraction of who they could be if they had a great conversation with themselves consistently, especially in writing it down and acknowledging it to that level. Because writing things down convert from just an idea, a thought, to something a little bit more real. It becomes more real when you write it down. And it's important that you acknowledge those things about you that are good, as well as the bad and the ugly. So which question's number one? Who am I? The second question is this: who do I want to become? See, gang, I believe this. The number one person that you should be competing with, because we all have people we compete with and say, oh, I want to be as good or better than that person. The number one person that I believe that you and I should be competing with is our former self, the person we were yesterday. Just simply strive to today be better than you were yesterday. So ask yourself that question: who do I want to become? Well, that starts with acknowledging who you are and then saying, okay, now who do I want to become? What do I want to be? Who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? What sort of person do I want to become? And when I say that, I mean in terms of, your health, your relationships, your money. There isn't anything that's not covered in one of those three things. So who do I want to become? Answer that question. The third question is this: what am I no longer willing to accept in my life? What I know is that every single one of you has one thing or many things that you would like to change, that you're not happy with, that may, in fact, if it persists, continues to have a negative impact on your psyche, your sense of self-confidence, that it will be very counterproductive and destructive to your aspirations, your dreams, and the life that you want to live. So ask yourself that question: what am I no longer willing to accept in my life? Is it that you don't have enough money and that there's stress because you're worried about the day-to-day, worried about having enough money for gas, for car payment, for the mortgage? Is it your intimate or personal relationship? Is there something going on there that needs to change that you're no longer willing to accept? And usually in those relationships, as much as we think it's about another person changing their behavior, I can tell you from personal experience, and a lot of it, it's more about you, myself, changing our personal behavior. That's where the change begins. So what am I no longer willing to accept in my life? The fourth question is this: what have I learned? It's so interesting. We take for granted the things that we've learned, and oftentimes we take them for granted to such a point that we forget those things. We move away from those things. So one of the best conversations you can have with yourself is, what have I learned? It gives you an opportunity to acknowledge the challenges you've had and the solutions you found to those challenges, and to acknowledge who you have become, who you are, because of all of those things that you learn. And you only learn things through challenge. So take the time to acknowledge all of those challenges you've had in your life. Maybe the family that you were born into and the challenges that were there. Maybe you've had addiction issues. Maybe you were fired from a job, right? And came back from that. Maybe you went to college and you were the first person in your family to do that, right? What are the things that you've learned, right? What are those things that you have done? What are your victories, right? What have you learned? What have been those journeys? Number 5, what gives my life purpose? Einstein was asked this question. Einstein was asked, what's the meaning of life? What is the purpose of life? And his response was, he believed that it was about serving other people. Now, it's argued that he was the smartest man ever to live, and he had a very clear and very simple answer. I like the answer. I think it's probably the right answer. So my question for you is, what gives your life purpose? Who are you serving? Who do you want to serve? What does that look like? How would you like to impact the lives of other people, and whose lives would you like to impact? What gives your life purpose? How will you know at the end of your years that you lived the life that you wanted to? In other words, what gave it purpose? Number 6, how will I know that I'm on track? Gang, it is difficult to know that you're on track when you don't know what it is that you want, when you're not clear about what it is you want. And I mean beyond the day-to-day of, well, I got to have food and I got to have shelter and, I got to have a little bit of entertainment. No, really, what do you want your life to look like so that at the end of your days, as you're sitting there, looking back at the decades, the 80 or 90 or 100 years that you lived, and you can say to yourself, how did I live? What gave my life purpose? And did I do those things? Did I do it? How will you know that your life is on track? Well, the only way to know that is by knowing what it is that you want, the life that you want to create. That's the true judge by which you should look at your behavior, is what do I want ultimately? Who do I want to become? And what am I doing on a daily basis to make that happen? How will I know I'm on track? I've set these standards, these aspirations, these goals, these dreams, right? And I've got to track that. I've got to know, am I getting closer? Am I making progress? So how will you know? Well, there's no way to know unless you get really specific about what it is that gives your life purpose, the things that you want your life to be about, and the people you want in your life. Number 7, what's important about money and what's important about health? So I've got 2 questions in that one. So what's important about money and what's important about your health? Define that. What's important about money? What is your relationship with money? I believe that most people have a very poor person's relationship with money. Money is about sustenance. It's about just simply getting by. Wealthy people, it's about living a life of opportunity, really of freedom, Most people don't have a relationship with money that provides freedom. They don't. The average person doesn't, because they don't have enough of it. So what's important about money, for example? What's important about your health? What do you want to look like, to feel like, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually? Define those things. With clarity, there is power. When there's power, you act with greater intention. When you act greater intention, you get better results. You'll look better. You'll feel better, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. What is important about your health? Define those things. Gang, the most successful people are clear about what they want and what's important to them and why they want it. So define those things. Be that person. Most people will say, well, I'll start behaving that way once I have the things that somebody like that has. No. It's be, then do, then have those things. So be that person now by asking these questions, identifying and getting clear about these things. What's important about money and health? Number 8, what type of intimate relationship do I want? See, for most of you, you're already in an intimate relationship. For some of you, you're not. But define it, whether you're already in one or you want to get into one. What do you want it to look like? Get clear about that. This is something that I learned many years ago. It's an important statement. Every relationship will fail if The expectations of those in that relationship are not discovered and therefore not met. But it is difficult for you to be in a relationship with someone and have them meet your expectations when you don't even yourself know your own expectations. So I go back to that question. What type of intimate relationship do you want? What's important to you in your relationship? Identify that and get clear about that for you, so then you can communicate that to your significant other or potential significant other. It's an important conversation. Expectations will either make or break a relationship based upon whether they are discovered and therefore met. If they are not discovered, they cannot be met, and therefore the relationship will break down. There's that gap. There's the expectation, and then there is the actual performance or the performance, right? And if the performance is below the expectation, you know what they call that in a marriage? It's called divorce. So discover what your expectations are and communicate those to your significant other. And then number 9, what have I accomplished? This is a great question to ask yourself. What have I accomplished? In totality in your life, what have you accomplished since you were born? Be willing to write those things down. I remember years ago when we started the company and I was trying to figure out how to speak, how to share a message. George said to me, he said, look, you've got to figure out what your story is, what your message is. And I said, George, I don't have a story. I said, look, I was born in Orangeville, Utah. Nobody knows where that is. It's a cow town. There are more cows than people. I went to high school, flunked out of a couple of classes, went to college, went to law school, flunked out of law school. I'm a real estate agent. There's no story. And he just laughed at me. Okay, I sat down and I started having a conversation with myself and really being willing to look at it and say, well, no, wait a minute. There are wins there. There are great experiences. There were failures, but there were triumphs. The totality of who I am comes from all of those things. So take the time to acknowledge your challenges and those wins and those triumphs. It's exceptionally important for you to acknowledge that because they define who you are. And it's important for you to know who you are, to believe in you, to feel good about who you are, to be in your own skin, to love yourself. It is critical to your own personal success. Whether it's simply to be able to get on the phone today and to prospect and say, I commit to doing that, or that it's, you want this amazing, loving, caring relationship that you would be with, in for decades. Whatever it is, it's going to be important that you bring a very confident, self-loving person to those situations. So what have you accomplished in your life? And then finally, this question: what am I grateful for? Every morning we do that for Morning Ascent. We write down our gratitudes. Gang, I believe that the average person is ungrateful the majority of the time. We do not take enough time on a daily basis to acknowledge the things that we have to be grateful for. Gosh, if you've ever done any traveling around, or even just go into a large metropolitan city and you look around at the way some people live, people living on the street, drug addiction, mental illness, lost family members, right? All sorts of destruction. You look at the way most people live in the world and how fortunate we are, how fortunate you are, despite all of the challenges that we face. We are very fortunate. Just remember, the single most powerful antidote to fear is love. Well, that's what expressing your gratitudes is. It's really a love, an expression of love, the things you love, the people you love, the gifts that you have been granted, that you didn't pay for, that you love, the things that we get to enjoy in this country, the things that your Creator gave you, your mental and physical capacities, those things, to be grateful for those things. See, the average person spends their time complaining and worrying about the things that they don't have and becoming a victim, but not you. You focus on the things that you have to be grateful for, and you become that victor, the person who is capable, because they recognize all of the great things in their life that have stacked the deck for them in their favor. Because every one of you has a deck that is stacked in your favor, guaranteed. But you have to take the time to recognize that. So gang, look, I hope that you keep a journal. If you don't, I hope this has inspired you to do it. I can tell you the single most important thing that I have done over the last 12 years in my personal growth is to have better conversations with myself. And those better conversations happened most exclusively in my journal. So if you're already using a journal, but you're not using one that looks like mine, go out and find one that looks important, because those things that you're going to write down, they are important. You'll go out and spend 30, 40, 50 bucks on a book that somebody else wrote. Man, why would you go out and spend one on a book that you're going to write? Because there's no more important story than your own. So take the time to do that, gang. And go out there and create that clarity of purpose and what you want your life to be about and what you need to do in order to do that. And go out there and rock and roll. All right. Thanks for joining us this morning. And remember, we've got this thing that happens every morning. So be here every morning. And don't forget, if you've not signed up for prospecting school, do that. And you can reach out to Judy or even your manager, and they can give you more information.